Hi, my name's Duncan. I'm a software developer at SSW, and today we're going to be talking about setting up Angular2 inside of Visual Studio, because a lot of the time you'll see on the projects, if you're downloading a starter kit from GitHub or anything, they're not necessarily in an ASP.NET web application, and there's a few things that you need to do to set it up. So we're going to step through those, and I'll show you some of my favorites for turning down the help in Visual Studio, in particular around generating JavaScript from your Typescript and a few other bits. So we're going to jump in to do that. So we don't really need very much help from, we just need something to serve up our index page and serve up our static JavaScript. So Visual Studio is definitely the tool that we do use for that, but most of the time our front ends are separated from our back ends now. We have an API that's in a different project. So we really don't need too much stuff. So what I'm going to do here is just go File, New Project, and let's give it a name here of Angular2 VS 2015. Can everyone see the font on that? It's good enough? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to choose an ASP.NET 5 template here, and I'm just going to choose the empty one. And there's a fair few steps. It's not something I memorize or would be proud to memorize. So I've got a little README, and I'm just going to pull it into the project now because I wanted you guys to see it from very start to finish. And I'll put it on GitHub so you can just pull this down, but you'll also have the video from it. So from here, I'm just going to add a existing item. I just got it sitting on my desktop, which is this README here. And this is the steps that we're about to go through. So we've done the first one here. We want to make a new empty ASP.NET Core web application. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off www-root. So we spoke about this the other day, that www-root is where we can, the new sort of next generation stuff for serving up all of your publicly available files inside of ASP.NET Core application. But there's some challenges around it in terms of being able to have your node modules folder has all of the assets that you need when you're doing your development work. It's like the Angular code that we're going to use, yet we don't want to push it into our www-root folder every time. We just want to keep it as the web convention where everyone else puts it, which is just straight on the root of your application. So I'm actually just going to turn off www-root and delete it and just serve up all the files just straight from the directory like we're used to. And there's ways around it, and we've danced around several different ways of solving this problem, and we've kind of keep coming back to the same solution. It's just too much work and too hard to explain every time, and easier just to turn it off. So, but it's not a black and white decision. So to make that happen, we're going to need to make a hostings.json file. So I'm going to come over, and actually I'm going to show you an extension I really like. It's called add new file. Who's used this? One person? Okay. Surprising. I really like it. Rather than having to do anything, I just pushed a Shift F2, and then I can come in and just go hosting.json, like so, and it will add me exactly what I want there. I mean, it's little things make you happy, huh? So, and then I'm just going to put in here, I'm going to say, okay, our web root, normally this would be defaulted to www-root, but I'm just going to say, no, now I want my web root just to be straight on the directory. I don't want it to be anywhere else. So once I've done that, we can flip back over and just save that. Flip back over and have a look at our README. The next thing we want to do is delete this www-root folder. Just going to postpone that for one more second though. I want to set it up so I'm not serving off a CSHTML file. I want to serve just off a straight index.html. So I'm going to add that again. So I'll do a Shift F2 index.html. And I'm just going to do it just a test string onto the page. And if I can get that onto the page, I'll be pretty happy. So all we're going to do now is override what we serve up. We just want to serve up static files. So to do that, if we come back at our README, we need to set up two things in our startup.cs. So if I come over to our startup.cs, and you can see here it's not something you necessarily need to read, like you memorize. It's sort of thing you just follow a few steps and you'll set this up at the beginning of your application. So at the moment when you get a default one, it's doing this app.run here and just serving up a string. So we don't need that anymore. But we are going to put in here these two, and Visual Studio is going to help us out and say, hey, we don't have a reference for these. And I'll use the little light bulb and add those two packages. So now we've got those two. So this is basically saying if you have a default.html or an index.html, Visual Studio will serve that up as the default. And we've put in an index.html, so we don't need to specify it. But you can even override that again and say you want to serve up an index.development or something like that.
So can you just step back, you went through quite quickly, the www root folder, it's still actually present. Did you physically delete it, or how did you?
Great question. So the question is, you can still see the www root folder, but now I've put those steps in to say we're not using it, I can just delete it. And I'm just about to.
So the steps where you said you're not using it, you just had to put in that line in the hostings.json.
You put in this line here.
Yeah,
so change your web root, so it's not www root is the most important thing.
Yeah, can you show me how you did that again?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I did is I made a hostings.json file, and inside of there, we're saying we're going to override what the web root is. It's no longer going to be www root, which is the default. It's now just going to be straight on the directory.
Okay, I understand. Sorry.
That's all right. Great question. Okay.
I see that it was that was driving the little icon of www when you changed that.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we watch, so the question was, or the response was that if I change this back to being www root and we watch and save this, we watch the icon over here in our Solution Explorer. Will it change on us? It's not changing this time, but you can see it actually changes from like a globe and back. So we'll change it back to that. And now I've got that set up, I can actually come in here and just delete that folder altogether. And then if I push F5, then we should be serving up that index page. And we've got a test. So it's not too complicated to do that sort of thing. And now we've got just a really stripped down ASP.NET Core application to serve up our Angular application. It's really bare bones. So great way to get started. Next thing we're going to do, if we come along and look at our README, so we've done that, and we had a lot of questions around how do we turn off the TypeScript on save and on build. So the big one is the build. I'm just going to shut this down so it stops. Oops. Flip back and just stop that. And then if we come over and right-click on the project and go to its properties, and you go to build, you'll see there's a compile TypeScript on build. So that's the first one, and that's the major one, because that'll just turn all of your TypeScript in your application to JavaScript. But there's still one hanging around in the background, which is a save on a TypeScript file. So if you've got a TypeScript file open and you save it, it will do an immediate compilation down to JavaScript, which is not so bad. But again, we don't want to do that. We want to be responsible for using our own compiler, and we're going to set the version number of it. So we want to turn that off. And that takes a little bit more work. So I am never, ever going to memorize this. But I'm just going to copy and paste this out of here, and it'll be available for you guys. And you need to come over to the project and unload the project. And then right-click on the project to go again and go edit the project. And then inside of the property group, put in the setting to say, OK, TypeScript compile on save enabled equals false, like so. And with that done, you can save. Right-click on the project again and just reload it. And then that's it, it's turned off. So there's no more help. And the first thing we're going to do when we bring in Angular here is we're going to suddenly start running into issues because we'll have TypeScript but no JavaScript, which is actually where we want to be. So with that done, we can pop back over to our README. So we've turned off our TypeScript. And next thing we spoke about is we want to, Visual Studio is awesome, and it gives you lots of help out of the box. Like the F5 experience, people call it, is amazing. But what we want to do with this F5 experience is, sometimes the help will play around with your version numbers of certain things. And we spoke about with NPM or with Node, that's a problem. So the default node that you get with Visual Studio is like version 1 or something like that. Yet most people are running 4 or 5. And it's a common problem when you start using Angular2. So we want to override to use our version of NPM, not the version that's Visual Studio's got. So to do that, this is another one of those kind of quirky ones. If you come into Tools and you go down to Options, and then Project and Solution, and then External Web Tools, it's pretty obvious, huh, to do this. And then all I'm just going to do is just, and you can see I've actually already done this here. I've popped, so if you see here my path is second, if I reset to defaults here, it'll put my path underneath the dev environment directory. So I just want to pop that up one. So first look in my node modules, and then look in my path, and then use Visual Studios. It's something that it only every now and again it catches you. It's not like a definite thing that catches you every time.
So would you mind just quickly going through that again?
Yeah, definitely. So Tools, Options, Projects and Solutions, External Web Tools, and then if I reset to default, I just want to pop my path up one level so it checks in there before it checks Visual Studio. Okay. So with that done, we can actually start making an Angular application. So I'm pretty sure all of you, if you had this list, you'd go through, follow the steps, or watch the video. It'd be about 5 minutes. And now we can just use, if we'd used a website in Visual Studio, it would have been easy, but we wouldn't get, all of the stuff that we get with an ASP.NET application. So for that, from here on in, it's just like doing Angular like we were doing on the other days, where we had just a folder and we just jammed in a source app or source folder, and then we made our components and so forth. But the question, so probably another 15 minutes from here, what we're going to do from this point is we're going to head over to Angular.io.
Sorry, Duncan. So you were assuming you would install a more recent node in this?
Yeah, the first thing I do when I get a machine is I always install a few packages. So the question is, assuming that I would always install Node on my machine. Yeah, absolutely. So whenever I get a new machine, I straight away go and install my web development things globally on my machine, which is usually, I'll install Visual Studio, TypeScript, Node, Karma, and a couple of other things. But they're the Node and TypeScript are definitely some of the main ones.
So when you set the path, when you change the external web tools path, that will now, Visual Studio will now use TypeScript that you install
Globally.
globally.
First we'll look in the Node modules. So if my project has already got it specified, then that's first. Then my global, then Visual Studios.
And the same goes for Node as well?
Yeah, all of those sort of.
All of those external tools.
Yep.
So you have to make sure that you've installed TypeScript on your machine globally, which would have happened.
Oh no, but if you've got it installed in the project, which you'll normally do. So normally in web development, so the question is, do you always need to install these globally? And I think, if you're doing this for your job, yeah, absolutely. You want to have all those things on command line. So you'll probably see me just kick off a TypeScript compiler from command line, and it's not inside Visual Studio. I want all those tools available to me everywhere in my machine. So I'll install globally in my machine, but then my machine's now a risk for the development team because my version might be out of date with someone else's. So then you pin down the version for your project with another install in your So I would have TypeScript maybe 1.8 or 1. I'm not sure or if we're at 1.9 for beta yet or something. But if I had a beta version globally installed, I wouldn't want that to affect my production application. I would want to have done an install at whatever the current one was for that. So it uses that before it uses my other one.
So the path directory, because isn't the path the global directory?
Yeah, but before it does that, it's going to look in the node modules, which is the project's specification of what version.
Just download the Gulp TypeScript version.
Yeah, all of those things you want to pin down for the project because you don't want to, be right before release and all of a sudden the versions are changed and you weren't in control.
Okay, so you're going to download TypeScript in the node modules and just set up and use that.
Absolutely. So that's what we're about to do right now. So this is good. Everybody's with me and we're all on track. So I like to go to Angular.io for this because when I'm doing my setup of a project, because every now and again, like quite frequently, because it's in beta, every 3 weeks or so, something changes quite big, and you're like, great, the Angular team's on board, it's time for me to jump on board and do the same. So typings as a package manager for your TypeScript is a great example for that. About a month ago, it switched over, and now you're like, great, I'll stop using TSD. I'd kind of seen rumors of swapping to a different package manager for TypeScript for the definition files, and then Angular will say, yep, that's what we're doing. So it's good like that.
Could you show us what your path currently looks like at the moment? So in other words, because we know that Visual Studio puts things in your paths naturally and whatever else, so your npm and all that is actually showing up before all the Visual Studio stuff?
Yep, can we do that? Can we get through the bulk of this? Because it's kind of going to be a tutorial for us to follow, and then we'll hack away and have fun at the end.
All right.
Cool, okay. So I come in here, click Get Started. I tend to do this quite a bit, if it works. Slow internet connection. And then there's a 5-minute quick start. If you were to be on full speed, you could probably get it done in 10. Let's see how we go. So down here on these tabs, I find this really useful. It's just the tabs of all the things you need to do to get a hello world up and running. So we're just going to implement these. It won't take us too long to do. So the first thing we're going to need to do is get the index page. So just going to copy the index page, and I'll just do this a couple of times, flip back over to Visual Studio and go over to our index and just override our test string and just paste that in. So we're going to do this a couple of times. So I need the index, and then I need to get a package.json, and this is where we're going to go get all of the versions of everything we need. And this one has got TypeScript already specified at 1.8.9. So I grab that, and I want to do this sooner than the other ones because I'm going to be waiting for, and you can see I don't have a package.json yet, and there's a couple of ways that I could add this in. I could use command line, or I can just manually add the file, which is what I'm going to do. So package.json like so, and then just paste it in there. So now I've got this. I know it's going to take a minute to go get all these. I'm going to just do an npm install and do that by a command line. But because normally that's what I'd do if I was in another IDE, but in Visual Studio, as soon as I save on here, it's actually probably going to run off and get all the dependencies for me. Or if I do a build, let's see if that does it. Yeah, so you can see they're restoring. So I didn't have to actually go to command line. It's kind of neat. Normally, you would open it up and do an npm install, and it would then go, okay, I'm going to go install all of your dev dependencies and dependencies here. So that's going to take a second to do. So let's go back and get the rest of our files here. So we need to get a tsconfig, and we spoke about this already. These are all the settings for being able to tell the compiler exactly how we want to run our compilation for TypeScript. So run back over, Shift F2, tsconfig.json. Paste that in, save. And there's a couple here to do. We want the typings as well. So we'll pop back over, Shift F2, typings.json. So really from here, the good news is it's just Angular and Visual Studio being the awesome IDE that it is. Once you've done that initial setup, this should feel just like what we've been doing other times. It shouldn't be a question of like this IDE versus that IDE. You're just in coding world, just setting up and getting your stuff going.
Just a quick question. You've got a lot of JSON files. Can we create a directory and put everything in that rather than have everything just parsed into the
You could, but so the question was, we've got all these JSON config. So you've got your root, and then you have, .json, .json, .json. It gets bigger than this. Karma and Gulp and Gulp file and all this stuff. But I find that tends to be what the whole web world is doing. So I'm very used to it. I flip onto a new project, I see the same thing. So you could, maybe a team get used to it, but it tends to be a kind of convention, so I just leave it. But it gets, expect it to be at least 10 files for config. So we've got that there. And I need to do a typings install because I got my stuff out of sync. So if we look at our package.json here, it's saying after you've done that npm install, which just finished, can you do a post install and run this command, which is the typings install. But I didn't have my typings.json in there when I ran it. So now this won't have run. And we actually, oh, it did run. And we have a typings in here. So actually, we've got the typings, but it hasn't actually got it there. So we'll have to run that still. We'll come back to that step in a sec.
So what is the typings?
So like we have, so the question was, what is the typings.json? So just like we have a package.json for all of our npm modules. So if another developer pulls that project down, we don't check in all of those third-party dependencies. They just pull down our project and they just go npm install, like I just did. I just went over here and I got this package.json file from the Angular site and went npm install. So I'm doing the same thing now, and this is going to make me a Node modules folder and put all those third-party libraries in dynamically. I'm not doing that. It does it when I do the install. So it's the exact same thing with typings. I have some type definitions I want. I have a typings.json, similar to my package.json. It's just a list of dependencies. And then I go typings install, makes me a typings folder and jams in all those dependencies. Okay.
And the typings is just for IntelliSense?
Yeah, it's so your IDE can run TypeScript and know everything. And it's really crucial. Like, yeah, a lot of the time you're going to need to have it for the compiler to work with third-party libraries like Lodash or underscore or jQuery or all of that stuff, or Moment for dates. So yeah, big part of it. So we've got that. Did we do a TS config? We haven't done our app.main, which is where we bootstrap our app component. And we haven't done our app component, so we'll just quickly head over and do those. But I'm going to need another folder for that. So I can come over here and I'll add a new folder. And I'm going to call it source, just because I'm going to put an app folder straight underneath it. And then I'm going to add again a new folder, and that will be called app. And then in here, I'm going to shift F2 and do an app.component.ts. So now in here we've got, notice how if I build right now, I built the app, just Control-Shift-B, I'm not getting any JavaScript because we've turned everything off, and that's what we wanted. So I'm going to do a Shift F2 on the source folder and add that main.ts I just copied. So there's our main. And the last thing we need is our app component that we're going to feed this main file and bootstrap our application. And you can see it's complaining straight away going, I don't know where this path is because we haven't got it. Or we have got it, but we haven't got an app component in there. So that's the last piece of the puzzle for us. So I'm going to come over to our here and go into our app component. Now I've deviated a slight bit from the Angular tutorial because they just go make an app folder and just jam everything in there and don't have any other folders, and that quickly gets out of control. So I straight away have a folder for every component and for services and so forth, otherwise it just gets messy really quickly. But they're trying to keep things simple for demos. So I just have to change some of the paths very quickly. So this one is actually sitting on will be .app/app.component. And now it's stopped complaining. And then in our index file that we brought in, I'm saying that we should bootstrap the main file and it's sitting under an app folder, which isn't the case. Ours is sitting under the source folder. So we just changed that to source. And now that should be kind of us working in Visual Studio with a project. And I didn't have to do any Visual Studio stuff since we finished with since we started bringing in Angular. It's just been normal web development. So hopefully you get the feeling that Visual Studio's, a great IDE for doing whatever you want. Let's push Control F5 and start without debugging and see if that worked. It's loading. We've got a few errors. It can't find source. I've got the path wrong. So if we come back here, we're passing in source/main, but I actually, with the system with System.js as a module loader, there's a bit of config sometimes you need to do. And I'm actually saying, whenever you get given an app, can you use the register format for module loading and just use JS extensions, not TypeScript? But we're not loading an app anymore, we're loading a source. So we have to change that. Whenever you see a source, I want you to use this module loading format and .js extensions. Don't worry too much about that right now. Who can guess what's wrong? Yeah, yep, it's good. It must be morning and everyone's had a good cup of coffee. Everyone's a step ahead again. Okay, so how are we going to do that? We've got so many choices. And how do we get our TypeScript to JavaScript in a production application? We'll talk more about this today. But for now, I'm just going to use the TypeScript compiler that's installed on my machine versus the one in Visual Studio. And we're actually going to use the one we installed when we did an npm install. And I'm just going to kick that off. So if I come back over here and have a look at package.json, we have a couple of scripts here. So we have a start script, which is actually not just going to start the TypeScript compiler watching any changes and making JavaScript for us. It's also going to kick off the browser and start a lightweight server. But we don't want that. We want to use Visual Studio as the server. So I don't want to kick off this start. And I copied this code straight from Angular2. All I want is this TypeScript watch, or this TypeScript :watch, which are kind of, they're the things I go npm run tsc :w. But I could also just run it globally on my machine by just going to the command line and running that one. But there's no, we're now in this hybrid of like we've turned Visual Studio right down. So it's only we're going to have to ask for everything again. So we're back to the command line, which is fine in an Angular world because there's a few commands you'll get used to doing, especially with task runners or other build systems. So one of the most favorite things I like to do in Visual Studio straight away as soon as I do a fresh install is I set up a keyboard shortcut to go Alt spacebar. And mine's a little slow because it's kicking off Commander as a shell. But basically, rather than trying to figure out where the path of my project is, I've just got it set up to go Alt spacebar. Wherever you open in Visual Studio, just take me to a console. And it's not too, there's some extensions. I've got a blog post at duncanhunter.com.au that takes you through setting up this one here. But basically now I'm here, I could just start the TypeScript compiler. So let's use the npm task we have there. So npm run tsc for TypeScript compiler, and then the watch. So if I push enter, now it's sitting there watching. Anytime I make any changes, until I close this console, it's going to, anytime a TypeScript file is saved with a change, it'll change all of our TypeScript again back down to JavaScript.
And so which compiler, so you installed the TypeScript compiler, it's in the nodes modules folder?
Yep.
So
and
a specific version of it in there,
yeah.
so you're not using the global TypeScript?
No, because I'm running it from the script that I have. I could also just run this same script right there and get it to run as well.
Okay, so you have to use the command line of Visual Studio to do that?
For this point where we're up to, yeah, you need to use it. But from here we're about to go into an awesome world of choice. And you could set up so many different build systems. And I really like this for keeping it simple. Other developers at SSW like the same. It's just like, we've got a great compiler and all we have to do is TSC watch. So we tend to use this quite a bit while we're developing and other stuff if it's very early days and we haven't set up a build system or other things. But you'll usually have a gulp task and you'll say gulp start and it will just turn everything on for you and you just have to develop and everything's saving and compiling and yeah. But for here we haven't got that set up, so we just want to kick this one off. So if we come back over and look at our source file here and we look at our main, we've now got this nice stacking that Visual Studio does. So we can see that we've got our JavaScript coming out. So if we pop back over to the browser and refresh. Woo! It's really easy stuff, but it's amazing how much headbanging there is reading through the docs to go, how do I turn off web.root and how do I delete it and how do I this and how do I that? And once you've got that done, you can just stay with the familiar tools that you're used to with Visual Studio, and it's pretty good. All right, so that's us. Thanks for watching. So I hope now you feel armed to start using Visual Studio with Angular 2.